This is a list of fashion goals I set for myself earlier in the year. And I haven't been showing it because I assumed I was just going to be buying all of this stuff. But as the weeks have progressed, I think I can make a handful of these. Now, if you look very closely, some of this stuff, yeah, that's going to have to be bought. But if you look even closer, you'll see I've written make/buy next to them based on what I think I can do. And so I'm going to start with the easiest one on the list, tees. I just like basic white. So I'm going to go out to the fabric store, buy some new fabric, and get to work. So it's field trip time. I headed out and hopped on my crimson red chariot, which ferried me into the city. First, I stopped off at the haberdashery shop, the kind of place that sells everything related to sewing except for fabric itself. I needed some needle and thread. Got inspired for some possible future projects. Then headed over to the fabric store, and then was about to make my way home, but the streetcar was just too full, and boy was that driver nasty. This gentleman blessed me with music while I waited. I got on the next chariot, and it was still full, but the driver was actually surprisingly friendly, and I was glad I left when I did because we got a nice downpour. Now it's time to get to work. So I've got this jersey fabric here, and it's a delicious, ever so slightly cream jersey fabric. It's soft, luxurious. It has a little bit of weight to it as well, which is everything that I want. But then I've got this knit fabric for the collar, and unfortunately it's a very clean white, so there's a visible difference. Now what the lady at the store suggested I do was dip this knit in some tea. And then put that aside. And then what I was told to do is just to dip it in, pull it out, until I get it to roughly the color that I want. Checking the light, it's kind of hard to tell. You know what, I'm going to leave this in here for a couple minutes and let's see what happens. I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm a man who blow dries his hair from time to time. I may have overdone that a little bit, okay? That's too much. I'm gonna try that one more time. This time, just a couple dips, nothing too crazy. Okay, I think that's pretty close. Yeah, that is pretty close. Yeah. So I'm going to cut this into two pieces, and I'm going to dye one a little darker than the other one, just in case it comes out in the wash. Now I'm going to take this first one and just dip it in and let that just ever so gently soak up a little bit of color. Oh, that's plenty. What I'm going to do with this one is just go a little bit lighter. I'm going to take my cloth here, dip it in, lay it on top, and just roll that in there. Just give it a nice squeeze so some of that liquid transfers over. So as you can see, I've got a dark one and a light one. Now, let's go throw this in the wash. Also, I use dish soap to wash my fabrics. I was very sensitive to Tide and all those other ones, and then I realized if this is good enough to clean the plates I eat off of, this here translucent skin will also do well. And you know what? All my red spots went away. So, pro tip. Give that an hour. Well, that experiment has failed. What has happened is that this rib knit fabric for the neck has more of a reddish brown undertone rather than that yellow that I was hoping for. And what the rib knit is so good for is that it has so much stretch, so that when I sew it down, I stretch it out, and then once I'm done, because of that stretch, it folds back down and lays nicely. So here's what I'm going to do instead. Okay, so the front is 9 on the neck and the back is 6.5, so that gives me 15.5. And yes, this is a bowl from my kitchen, but essentially what I want is a nice arch. So if I draw a line starting here and then wrap that around to, oops, that moved on me. Alright, so there to right here. So then I'm going to measure in 2 inches. Let me just roughly draw in that circle. Yeah, that's going to have to stretch too much. The fabric won't stretch that much. Okay, scrap this idea. I'll be honest, I'm feeling quite flustered right now. You know when you want something just to go well and everything's going wrong? That's what I'm going through right now. But all was not lost. I figured out a way I could still make this idea work. So 1.25 all the way around. Oh boy, my zipper's open. Oh boy, I am not firing on all cylinders, huh? Before I use my nice fabric, I'm going to use the stuff that's the scraps from this stuff. Just a portion of the back as well. And then finally, the neck. But I'm going to need 2 pieces for the way I want to do it. I've got the right sides of the fabric facing each other. And what I'm going to do, is I am just going to stitch along the shorter inside seam. Also, new light. I'm going to flip this the other way around. All right, I gotta do it all one way. Oh, Jesus. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. Okay, and then I'm gonna flip it all the way around. And now ever so slowly, I'm gonna run a top stitch just to hold that edge together. Unfold the fabric on either ends, lay those together. Then I need to make this a full loop. Now sew these shoulders together. Now just walking it out so that it's the right length. Pin it on. And now make sure everything's aligned and just work my way around. I didn't. Okay. I hadn't pulled on the collar enough so that and the neck hole weren't aligning. Yeah. So I took the collar off to resew it, and then I had another thought, which is I've top stitched along here and sewed underneath, which means there's very little stretch in this. So before I even bother resewing this on, let me do a very important test. Yeah, there's no way this even fits over my head. Okay. This, of course, will, because, see, there we go, not a problem. But because of the top stitching, oh, man. Okay, okay. What do you want from me? What do you want from me, Jesus? Okay, okay. All right, screw it. I'm gonna use the rib knit, and of the two, I'm gonna use the one that has the least amount of dye in it. And it is what it is. So I started from the beginning, laid out my fabric, put down my first pattern piece, pinned it down, trimmed that out, and then repeated the process for all the remaining pattern pieces.
These days I don't know. Wanna get further away from it all.
Before I start sewing though, what I am going to do is swap out these needles for some ballpoint needles, which I learned about a few weeks ago. And the point of these is for sewing things like jersey fabrics so it doesn't rip them. All right, get that one in there. Get my thread back through, which is always a delicate process. And then I repeat that process on the other side because sergers actually have 2 needles. I just run it a little bit just to make sure it's still working. Yeah, okay. First thing I always sew is the shoulders. Press that seam backwards. With this machine as well, before I start sewing, got to swap out the needle here. Now this one's quite a bit easier. So, there we go. Bada boom, bada bing. What I'm doing is I'm top stitching the shoulders down. And while I'm here at the sewing machine, I can go ahead and just close up the collar knit fabric. And then I take it and I fold it in half. Just iron that down. So that's the center, and then that's the center there. And then finally, the corners as well, or right over the shoulders. So fold that around like so. And then as I go along, I just have to give the top a nice gentle tug. Woo! Burnt myself on the edge. Okay. Press that edge down. And now I'm going to just run a top stitch around the collar. A technique that I learned last week where if I do the hems first before I close up the sides, they're actually much cleaner. The bottom of the sleeves as well. And then press that seam over. Now do the same thing along the bottom of the shirt. And then this stitch is to stitch down that hem, and I want to go as close to the edge as possible. I'll repeat this process along the bottom of the shirt. I sewed the back piece on backwards, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but the fact that I make my left side bigger than my right side means that it has to be exactly the right way. I gotta step away. After I had a little cool down, I put on some of my favorite music to boost my mood, had to take virtually everything apart, and then redo everything you've seen up until this point. Okay, back on track. So, now on with the sleeves. Of course, I gotta top stitch the sleeve on. Finally, the last set of 2 seams, the ones that go on either side to close the shirt. Wow. Oh, thank you, Jesus. That has been a mission. Whew. Mandy, this has been a lot more than just making a t-shirt. This has been an exercise in perseverance. And I gotta say, the craftsmanship, despite all the struggles, I'm really happy with that too. Now, the collar is a slightly different shade than the shirt. And I think unless I point it out, most people aren't gonna notice. But I will. But that's okay. What I'm most happy about though is the fact that I made it and went through all those struggles and kept going, and here we are. It's with a heavy heart that I have to say goodbye to most of you. But we've always known that I'm just fostering you on behalf of my friend as he was making his transition to Montreal. But thank you. You've adorned the background of my videos, and we've grown together, literally and figuratively. You've even showed me how to nurture life, and I thank you for that. But I believe in honesty, and well, there can only be one pretty one in this household, and as I get better at sewing, that's going to be me.